question if potentially it could be budgeted to pay for that service to be done elsewhere by a sworn officer. So fingerprinting and background checking would be universally done, I would imagine, by a peer town. So I'm trying to think of just ways that we could maybe outsource this for a period of time and not create a long-term liability in officer cost because of those types of services.
I understand, Chris, but in a way now that goes directly to the heart of what Chief Ingridson introduced in this town several years ago, and that is community policing. The theory being that the more a police officer is involved in normal, everyday contacts with the civilian population, the less your crime statistics affect you, the more compliance you have with norms. If we start, shipping out, as you suggest, for instance, to other towns for that kind of work, which we'd have to pay for anyway, we will lose a very important part of community policing. Now that we can go into a couple of days worth of discussions about is community policing worth it or not. Should we just be an enforcement officer, enforcement police department, only going out and chasing bad guys and giving tickets and stuff, and not participating in community activities? So that's a good question, but it goes right to the heart of what this force has been and what I think it should continue to be. And I think it's a part of the fabric of Simsbury. But it's, I don't like that. I appreciate the questions because it allows us to bring up the basic philosophy behind that policing.
Yeah, I think Mike hit it on the nail on the head. It's the community policing philosophy that this town has adopted. These are services our residents.
Yeah, Jen, I agree with you. As a consumer, though, if I'm looking at this from a consumption standpoint, and I don't, the community policing, we're 100% beyond that. And the consumer, my
You're breaking up, Chris.
Novice and thought about community policing with interacting with officers out in the community. It's not necessarily the one time that I go into the police department to have my fingerprints taken. So for my background check, that to me is not necessarily community policing, and that's a hard sell. I want to fund the police officer positions to put them on the street, so to speak, doing things in the community. So I'm gonna have a hard time using the spike in administrivia that the poor police department has been placed upon the police department from a reporting and accountability, which is crippling them, and the fact that for some archaic reason only a sworn officer can do a background check. That to me is really hard that to me is not getting to community police. It's not funding your community. It's just adding officers to get more officers on the street to do the community policing. The fingerprinting and the background check, that's not community policing. So I'm just saying for that aspect, that administrivia stuff, I'd like for us to look at alternative ways to solve it versus just throwing a body at it to get that job done.
It's kind of like getting your fishing license, at the town clerk's office, or going to Granby again. You can look at it in a number of ways, no question.
So can I go back to Amber's question? Why don't we have a part-time clerk? And is that the position that's open right now? Like, is that an open position that we're searching for?
I think the chief.
Go ahead, Jen.
We are not, as far as I know, looking for a part-time clerk right now. We do have an administrative position open, but that's not it. The chief can explain the history of the police clerk.
Yeah, so that started as a part-time position. We have two of those, but we had the second one, I believe, started around 2010, and it went through 2015. The gentleman retired, and we were not authorized to fill that position. We did try at least another year or so after that to bring that position back without any success. that position definitely did help out. And just a little pitch on the community policing aspect. We don't need 6 more officers so we can do fingerprints, but that 738 contacts that we had last year was 738 opportunities for a multitude of positive thoughts, expressions, changes of ideas. I don't know how many people have said, I've met officer so-and-so, and it's from one simple little phone call, a fingerprint, whatever it may be. The person who did that job as the part-time clerk was a police officer for 30 years. He brought with him that same sort of idea. And I think that did the same thing. It supported that. It was a member of the police department. So it's not as if we're, objecting to, having somebody else do that like we did before, but it's 738 opportunities that we were able to take advantage of each and every year. And there is a high and a low for those. We had a spike in 2014. We had a spike in 2016. 2020 was the largest spike that we had seen. But that's the history on that position anyways.
Thanks.
Going back to the other questions we had received, one thing that we were asked was, is there a priority of ranking of the requests? Would traffic come before detective? Again, I think we talked about that a little bit. So if you want to follow up on that, Wendy, if you had more questions about the ranking, I would say that the budget we presented and the budget that the chief submitted is the absolute minimum that this commission feels is necessary to provide adequate public safety to the citizens of Simsbury. It's lean and fiscally responsible. Yes, it's an increase, but as we've talked about some of that, the factors, growth in population, the Police Accountability Act, put extra demands on the force that are outside of our control. And I think Commissioner Long mentioned since 2018, we requested 4 sworn officers and we got 1, the deputy chief. So hi, Chris, welcome. But this is not just out of the blue. Along those lines, we better talk about that. You asked, what are the additional capital costs that would be required to support a larger PUD? Are they included in this proposal, or will we see more capital needs as a result? Cars, vests, cameras, etc. In short, no. We're not going to need additional cruisers. If you said right now, chief, go out, get those 6 officers, we're not going to turn around tomorrow and be like, hey, we have these additional capital requests. There are expenses like the body cam or the radio that are part of the new officer onboarding expense, if you will. The firearm, the taser, the uniform, which includes the ballistic vest. But all of this was included with the budget proposal. So it's not something we would come back later to say, oh, by the way, we need these things. For example, the tasers, I think, are scheduled for fiscal year 24 to be replaced. So we would be able to manage our resources to handle the taser situation now and not have to buy additional tasers for the 6 new officers. One of our CNR requests is sidearm replacement. Again, that's a current request. We wouldn't need to ask for additional. We'd be able to manage the 6 additional officers within that. So looking at all of the CNR stuff, the vehicles, I know I just said, we're not going to ask for additional vehicles for those 6 officers, and we're not. This is 3 police cruisers and 1 admin vehicle, which is part of our annual budget cycle request. These are not based on a request for additional officers. The MDT and the in-car dash cameras, we're asking for 2 to put in the SRO vehicles. Under the Police Accountability Act, the SRO vehicles cannot serve in a police function unless they have those in-car dash cameras. We're also asking for 1 to be put in a currently marked vehicle. To do that allows us to expand our force without incurring a greater cost. The sidearms, again, we touched on, they are about 10 years old. There's been advancements in technology, safety, and accuracy. So we would like to avail ourselves of these advancements. And the current weapons we have could be turned in to get credit towards the cost of replacements. And I added the facility study on here. This is in its infancy. There's nothing that we are doing right now other than working with the Department of Public Works, the town manager, and Tecton to get a study of our facilities. So that is a long-term goal, but it's not on our current CNR. So in conclusion, we're coming to you and we want to work together to strengthen our commitment to the community policing. We want to allocate the appropriate resources to the police department, and we want to invest in the short-term and long-term police department needs. That is all I've got for you. So if you have more questions, fire away.
Hey, Wendy, if I can, may I jump in with
Sure.
something?
Sure.
Jenna and team, thank you. And this is a question I think I have for both the police commission and my colleagues on the Board of Selectmen. I know my feeling after hearing this conversation is that this is so needed and so valuable. And it's really the tip of the iceberg for, I think some of us on the Board of Selectmen, you on the police commission, you're immersed in this data all year long, and you're really just trying to bring us along on this journey to get to the same place. My thought is that there are likely things that we can do in the short term during this budget cycle to get us closer to where we want to be to relieve some of this immediate pressure. But I think there's also a longer term conversation about getting consensus between my board and your board on where exactly we need to go, and really putting a plan, whether it's a 3-year plan or a 5-year plan, to fully get to where we want to get to. And I was going to propose some kind of working group that would allow us to stay engaged in this work and move it forward. And I didn't know I appreciate feedback, what others think.
I think we would absolutely be on board. Our goal has always been to continue to provide excellent service to the community and to make sure that we have a thriving police department that can provide those services. So unless any of my fellow commissioners would disagree, I think we would be up for such a group.
Well, I would want to add to that. You mentioned the workload study. I mean, are there agencies, is there something that could be also funded externally to do a workload study of how we operate and make sure that we have enough people?
So after last year, when there was zero interest in approving the 3 officers requested, we did a quick brief look into what is available by outside agencies that do that. And we're looking at roughly $20,000 and above to even start those kind of surveys. So it's something that's done and it's something we could do, but there is a cost associated with that.
Just a couple final thoughts from my side. We're all trying to balance the fine line of understanding what's needed, what's permanent trends for the future, and what the taxpayers can to afford. There was correct. I don't think there was no interest in funding those positions. I'm not going to really stand that that's a factual statement from the board's position. I think like any department, like any ask, we move around in a carousel. Frankly, we meet the needs as they move around. You can't meet all of them. We've got multiple stakeholders we have to answer to. There's no doubt that I'm not here to say your numbers and your reasonings are wrong at all. I'm not questioning anyone's the validity in them, the justification. It's getting the questioning come understanding, so I can communicate to Board of Finance. Because these positions, guys, they have significant long-term consequences from a budgetary standpoint, especially since when you enter into the liabilities of pensions. Now, those certainly can never be balanced against the consequences of public safety. But that's what, that's what our job is also, is to balance understanding the needs of public safety, but what this town can afford long term. These are
I don't know. I can't hear Chris.
monumental
Yeah.
costs that will push other things hard for me sometimes, in idea of moving forward, with a sort of a perspective. I'm sorry. Yeah, hopefully it's a little clearer. The last, I don't think where public safety was a Board of Selectmen priority being put up there, because this is, I think Sean and I for certain have stated for years, and I've taken from Sean's perspective, we have always made public safety the number one driving component of what our job is on a daily basis. So I'm sorry if the police department, the commission, or anyone else doesn't feel that public safety is a primary concern for us. It shouldn't be one of our goals. It's one of our stated, factual, hard-written, hard-coded goals as leaders in this community. So please, don't, you have my assurance that your needs and will always be paramount, in my mind.
Anybody else want to add any comments here?
I'd like to just leave a thought on the table, if I may, please. After I listened to the folks in the emergency money that's available the other evening, I listened to that entire meeting. God bless you for being there for it. But it seemed to me that there was an underlying theme there that we all ought to think about a little bit, and that is there are things that we currently have in this community. There are assets we have, and there are needs that we have that are long-standing. And for instance, when I hear bridges are going to fall down, or things of that nature, or that things need maintenance, there comes a time, I guess, when all of us in our own private lives and elsewhere, we have to stop and pause occasionally and say, wait a minute, let's bring everything that we currently have up to date. Let's make sure that what we have works, or that we really need it. And let's just take a minute of pause here and not enter into new things just yet until we make sure that what we have is operating properly and is working the way it should. And it sounded to me a little bit like that's what was being said in that by the public in that meeting the other evening, that hey, there are needs now that exist that haven't gotten fixed, that aren't being maintained necessarily right up to snuff. So I don't envy you that you guys sit there and take all of that stuff into consideration. But maybe it is time for a pause, and just to make sure that we bring things, our current assets and our current activities up to date, and make them as good as they can before we start funding new projects. I'll just leave you with that thought.
Yeah, Mike, I just want to add one thing, that if we're talking about the American Rescue Plan money, which is what we were discussing, they basically try to not add to operating costs and to not create any cliffs. So if we add 6 new officers, that's going to be a cost in perpetuity with new ones coming down the line. So I'm just wanted to clarify that.
I'm not suggesting you could fund 6 officers out of that fund. It could be that the training session and the initial equipment could come out of a fund like that, a one-time only expense.
Or a study. Yeah, our workload study could also come out of that too, maybe to evaluate, the right, get to the right number as we move forward.
Sure, because we've looked at that 2 or 3 times in the past, and we always say, well, maybe next year we'll fund the 3 officers you need, but maybe we'll do a study in the meantime. But it hasn't happened. And here we are getting further behind each and every year. And now we're looking at the overlay that Travis brought up about, we know that there are folks who are going to be reaching retirement age, and they could leave us on a month's notice. And if it takes us 16 months from the day we try to hire somebody to actually hire somebody, get them at the training, get them certified, get them on the road, it's 1.5 years that's gone by. and we're right back in the soup. It's overtime, it's not being represented, it's not having traffic officers on the street, it's not having patrolmen, it's being short one detective. We just never get there. So I understand the problem and I understand the thought, and fine, conduct that study, but don't stop and hold everything else up in the meantime. We got to go forward and just get to where we should be now, never mind in the future. Sorry, I didn't mean to pontificate. Thank
Well,
you.
I just want to say one other thing too. I know, like, you asked for 6 officers. But if we don't, as a board, get to 6 officers, I asked this, there was just, we need 6. Will there be a priority if we say we can do 2 or 3? You know, is it a traffic officer? Is it a detective? Is that data that we could get if we get to that point?
Well, I'm not going to try to second guess what the police department.
I'm just asking the question.
Yeah, I know, and I don't have an answer for you because I'm not, competent to judge whether we should have a detective or a traffic guy. Whoever comes in the door, if we think somebody's going to be a good police officer, then they can be placed where they are most effective. So I'm not going to try to, guess what do we need. We need a detective more than we need a. Yeah, I know. I'm not going to get near there. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay, just
Yeah. But thank you very much for having this meeting and, listening to us. I appreciate it.
okay. And is anybody else, Amber, you didn't have a question, did you? I wasn't sure if I was.
Yeah, I think it got covered.
Okay. Okay, well, we thank you guys for coming. The police commission and the chief and deputy chief are here, Maria and Melissa. And we'll have to keep looking at the data as we move into the budget, which is coming up in 3 weeks. Okay, can I ask somebody to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll move that, Wendy.
Okay, any
Oh, okay.
second?
I'll second it.
You're not allowed, I don't think.
Yeah, I'll second it, Wendy.
Thanks, Amber. All those in favor?
Hi.
All right, thanks.